let's talk about the scariest thing that can happen when talking to a woman. And no, it's not approaching, and no, it's not getting rejected. Apparently, from my experience as a dating coach, the scariest thing that can happen when talking to a woman is you're talking to her and you run out of things to say. This seems to terrify guys more than anything else, and this is where I see guys fuck up their interactions in some of the most creative, interesting, and awful ways that you can possibly imagine. So what happens? Guys in a conversation with a girl, whether it's a cold approach, whether it's at a party, whether it's at work, guys in a conversation with a girl he likes, and it's probably going just fine. Maybe it's going great, maybe it's just going so-so, but it's not going badly. It's not done by any means. But what has happened? Every conversational thread, every topic of conversation is currently closed. It has come to an end. First of all, this is your fault anyway because you shouldn't be having a one-thread conversation, but that's a whole other topic. Let's say this happens, because it is gonna happen in most conversations most guys have with women. You now have nothing to say. What happens? Guys panic. They, sorry, I gotta go, and leave. Or maybe they ask for a phone number way prematurely when there's no interaction and they probably get rejected and it doesn't go anywhere. Or they go back and remind the girl why they came and talked to them 6 more times. Hey, so anyway, so just to remind you, I thought you were cute and I wanted to come over and talk to you even though I've told you that 6 times already. You see so many flubs here. The funny thing is this situation actually is not a crisis. It is an opportunity. This is a wonderful, beautiful moment in the interaction, because in this moment, when there is no topic of conversation, but the girl likes you, or at least the girl is responsive to talking to you, you have the ability to introduce any topic of conversation you want. You have total control of the direction of the conversation. You can now make it a conversation about a topic where you're high value. You can now make it a conversation that is man to woman. You can now introduce flirtation. You can now be a little bit cocky and make some banter in the conversation. It's actually a beautiful moment, but most men are terrified of it. Here's what you do in this moment. The universal solution. When the conversational threads have all ended, you give the interaction what it needs, whatever that is. If you're in a conversation that has not yet established banter, establish some banter. If you're in a conversation where you've bantered a little bit, but you haven't built any kind of comfort or connection, do something that builds comfort or connection. If you're in a conversation that's good, but it's not clear who's chasing who, set up a frame where the girl's chasing you. If you're in a situation where it's gone really well and it's time to take the girl home, start seeding the idea of going home. In this moment, when all the conversational threads are closed, you have ultimate say in what comes next. And here's the extra beautiful part. Because it's so predictable that this is gonna happen, you can plan ahead. This is one of the few times in a human interaction where you can do homework. You can figure out what to say in advance, you can bring it to the conversation, and it's almost guaranteed to work. So let's say you came up, you talked to the girl, you've talked for 30 seconds, a minute, and it's been positive, but the conversation threads are done, and there's no banter yet. You can almost universally say, you know, I can't decide if I love you or hate you. Or you can say, you know, there's one thing about you I like, but one thing about you I'm not so sure about. Or you can say, you know, I think you're cute, but I think you're trouble. Any of those lines works almost universally in that spot with almost any girl, and it gives the interaction exactly what it needs. Or let's say you've been talking to the girl a little bit longer, there's some good banter, there's definitely some, you know, some connection, some sexual tension there, but you haven't gotten to know her at all. Well, in that moment, you can say, you know what? You're really fun to talk to, but I honestly don't know a single thing about you. Can you tell me something that's a little bit surprising about you? Or tell me something about you that like not everybody knows? And now all of a sudden you've transitioned the conversation into exactly what it needed to be. Or let's say you talk to a girl for an hour and a half, and now all of a sudden you get to this like kind of awkward, oh God, what do we talk about now moment. We'll say, you know what? I feel like the vibe here is kind of dying down. We got a little bit longer, but there's, you know, are you adventurous? There's one more place I'm kind of tempted to take you, but I'm not sure yet. We'll see. And now all of a sudden you've brought up the most important topic for the night continuing in the way that you would ideally like it to go. So what do you need to do in this moment? Well, you need to 1, recognize where you're at, 2, be a bit bold, and 3, do your homework. Again, it's very, very easy to have a line prepared for this critical situation. And I will tell you, having been a dating coach for 20 years and having had hundreds of students live and thousands of students online this year alone, this is the single biggest sticking point I see. On my live programs on the weekends, I film my students, we watch what they're doing, and almost universally, at least half or more of the students are getting into good interactions, and they're getting to this moment of indecision and they're completely flubbing it. So what do? We give them some things to do, and all of a sudden their conversations take off. So first thing, don't fear the silence. Guess what? Silence is a good thing and tension is a good thing. More tension in your interactions actually will lead to better interactions. So when there's a silence, breathe, relax, enjoy that silence. Actually, if you were to do nothing in the silence, if it's gone really well, there's a chance the girl will actually start gaming you. She'll actually say, so where are you from? So what do you do? And she'll start doing the lame, get to know you questions that you were about to ask her instead, and now she's chasing you. So that can happen. But if that doesn't happen, what do? You introduce what the interaction needs. You reach into your pocket of tricks, reach into what you've done your homework and say, oh, here is my line for sexual tension. Let me drop it into the conversation. And guess what? It'll work. Why? Because it's a good line, but also because the girl wants the conversation to go well too. She doesn't want it to end, but she also doesn't know what to say. And you know what? When the sexual tension is created, it's a relief because it's what the interaction needed. It makes the interaction better. Or when you've had a lot of tension and there's no connection and you run out of things to say, reach into your bag of tricks, grab a canned line, and insert the connection. Start that process of evaluating the girl and finding out if you guys are compatible. I literally cannot overemphasize to you how easy and how effective this message is. But there are two possible objections I think a lot of you might have, so let me address those. The first one is, what are these lines and where can I get them? What the heck are you suggesting I say? Well, in a moment, I'm gonna refer you to a place where you can actually steal a lot of my lines and you can, again, just grab them and directly put them into the conversation. So we'll solve that in a second. The other objection I do hear from guys is, this doesn't feel natural to me. I don't wanna steal a line. I don't wanna use a canned line. I wanna be myself. And you know what? That's completely fine. If you want to be yourself, the same method applies. You're just gonna have to do it in a slightly more difficult way. So either take these canned lines and rewrite them to sound like something you would actually say something that's effectively similar but in your own words, and then use that so that it's not my canned line, it's your canned line that reflects your personality. Or understand the idea behind the canned line and say something that says the same idea. Instead of, I can't decide if I love you or hate you, you can say, you know, it's really random for me to meet a stranger, so this feels a little awkward to me. I don't want this to necessarily go too fast. Maybe that's in your own words, okay? Maybe that's congruent with you, but it does the same thing of saying there's a positive and a negative. So the core format doesn't change. The core goal of what you're trying to insert into the conversation doesn't change. You're just changing the lines to something that's congruent to you. And if the whole attitude isn't congruent to you, well, honestly, fix that. Because the belief you're gonna need to have to be really successful with women is that you are bringing value to the conversation, that you would be a good boyfriend, and that there are a lot of women who would appreciate you, and therefore you do have the right, the privilege to pick the girl you have the most congruence with, the girl who you have the best connection with. So if that's a problem for you, that's a psychological problem, that's something you need to philosophically get handled, and that's much bigger than any particular line. Regardless of anything, the idea is this: I'm a high value guy, you are an attractive woman, there's no reason why we shouldn't get along, and so I'm going to proceed in the conversation, making it as fun, interesting, and positive toward that end as it can possibly be. And the girls who like me are going to appreciate that. It's gonna create the best, most fun interactions for both me and for her. Okay, back to where are these actual lines, what do you say? I'm gonna put a link in the description to something called Steal My Lines. Go ahead and grab the lines off of there and use them at your leisure. Use them exactly as they are if you like, or modify them to your own words. I don't care, either one's fine. They're also separated into categories. Some of them are for that initial tension, some of them are for connection, and some of them are for later on in the interaction. So use them with my compliments. But just to summarize, number one, do not be terrified of running out of things to say. This silence is actually a great moment in the interaction. It's a dynamic, positive opportunity to move the conversation towards being exactly the conversation you want it to be for both you and her enjoyment. So stop fearing running out of things to say. Love this moment of tension and transition. It's one of the best moments for successful approaching and attracting women. All right, take this, use it, take my lines or make your own, but go out there and stop fearing running out of things to say.